So, if you were here, I'm assuming that you are doing turtle articulation or just want to learn about articulations in general. So, to start off, what is an articulation? An articulation is where you take an organism's bones and reconstruct them in the way that they would be in the organism when it was alive. Little bit of either a warning or a disclaimer. The turtles that I am working on are eastern box turtles and were confiscated from a poacher by the DNR and then given to the university that I am working on these box turtles through. And just remember to make sure that any turtle or any animal in general that you are working on is either legal to work on, legal to keep, or just both of those in general. Thank you. Now back to the video. The articulation process can be separated into 4 different categories. First is maceration, which is removing soft tissue from the hard tissue, aka the bones. Degreasing, which is removing grease from the bones. Whitening, and then finally reconstruction, putting the bones back together. There are several tools that you'll need when articulating a specimen. First of all, you'll need the specimen itself, a knife, Dremel, or scalpel, something to cut into the specimen, especially in the case of a turtle where you need to remove the plastron from the carapace. Third is an old toothbrush or something similar to help remove excess soft tissue once you're done with the maceration process, if there is any left. A jar or waterproof container to put the specimen in. Several of these steps require a container that can hold water. Third is dish soap for the degreasing process, hydrogen peroxide for the whitening process, wood glue to help hold the bones together when you are reconstructing the skeleton, and disposable gloves if you do not want to get decaying tissue on your hand. Materials that you might find useful or helpful would be Ziploc bags to help separate the bones, extra jars for when you macerate the feet or hands. I found that would be very handy for making sure that you have all the finger bones and metatarsals and whatnot. A trash bag to get rid of all the soft tissues that you cut out before the maceration process. Wire to help wire in place different bones. I have mainly used this for the vertebral column. Wire cutters to cut said wire. Sharpie to help categorize what you have and what you need. So several of my bags are labeled C for central, which would include the pelvic girdle, the skull, the spinal column, and then tape to help keep a bone in place when the glue is drying. I have found that this is very helpful. Now, for the maceration process itself, what you'll want to do is start by cutting into either side of the connecting bridge between the carapace and the plastron, using either a scalpel or a serrated blade or a Dremel tool. Personally, I have found a Dremel tool to be the fastest, easiest, and safest option. So if you have a cutting blade on a Dremel tool, I would suggest using that, or a cutting wheel technically. However, I have used a scalpel before. It was a younger turtle, so it was easier to cut into, but I was very careful and very slow in making my incision. Now, once you have the 2 pieces, or the plastron cut off of the carapace, you'll want to take your scalpel and cut the skin that is connecting to the plastron, so you can start to peel the plastron off. It will be very difficult to peel it off, but don't be afraid to use a little bit of force. There is a shell for a reason, and there's no other bones that connect to the plastron itself. Now, to get the plastron separated from the carapace, one thing that I would suggest doing is scooping out all the internal organs and then finding the connection points between bones and carefully cutting the connective tissue off of those bones, specifically to separate the arms and legs from the central body. And then you will want to place each limb into its separate container. That way, the very small tarsals and metatarsals and phalanges are in with the correct bones. This will save you a lot of time on the back end when you are trying to separate or organize the bones themselves. Once you have separated the limbs from the central body, you'll want to take off as much soft tissue as possible without destroying any bones in the process. In my last turtle, I was able to cut off the head and neck and the pelvic girdle and tail and put those in a separate jar, and then fill the turtle shell itself with water so that it can be used as its own container. Also, once you have the limbs, you'll want to put those in separate jars, fill them with water. You can choose to either seal the jar itself or continuously refill the jars with more water as they start to lower and as the water starts to evaporate. And then after a few weeks, up to a few months, the bones should be clean of most, if not all, soft material. And once that happens, you'll want to take each jar individually and strain out all the bones. Bones with some soft tissue that is still on them can either continue to macerate, or you can take that brush that we mentioned earlier and brush off the remaining soft tissue. Then, once all the bones are fully cleaned off of all soft tissues, you can go on to the second step, which is degreasing. During degreasing, what you'll want to do is have your bones in new clean containers filled up mostly with water, and then also add a good serving of soap. It doesn't usually matter how much soap, just as long as it has enough to leach the grease out of the bones. I personally use around like a tablespoon for an entire turtle, but it's up to you. Then you'll want to leave that for a good few weeks, up to like a month or two, depending on how greasy your bones are. This will help keep things from yellowing and smelling bad. And then it'll also just preserve the quality of the bones. Then once that month is up, you can take the bones out of that solution, wash the soap off of them, and start step 3, which is whitening the bones. What you'll want to do for the whitening process is take all your bones, in their individual containers and make a 1% hydrogen peroxide solution. So usually at the store, you'll have a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution, so you'll want to dilute that enough that it is a 1% solution. This is important, especially with the smaller bones, so that they won't just dissolve away. Then, once you have your 1% solution, you'll fill all the recently cleaned out jars, put the bones in those jars, and wait a good few hours to like half a day. I personally would keep an eye on them just due to how hydrogen peroxide acts towards bones. And once they get to the level of whiteness that you want, then you can take them out of that solution, rinse them off to stop the hydrogen peroxide from eating away at the bones, and dry them. In this process, if you want to keep the scutes on the turtle shell, you will want to keep the shell itself, or at least the scutes themselves, out of the water. How I did this, while also getting rid of the soft tissue on the bones, was that I cleaned the inside as well as possible, and then kept the shell as a kind of container for itself, which meant that the inside of the shell was wet and macerating all the material that was on the inside, but would leave the outside where the scutes are intact. Now you can also soak the turtle shell to help soften up the excess tissues if you're having trouble getting water on the sides of the shell. Just know that the connective tissue between the scutes and the shell itself will degrade over time, and thus if the scutes start to come off, just glue them back on using wood glue. That's what I had to do most recently with the turtle that I'm working on in this video. Reconstruction of the skeleton itself, I am by no means an expert on it. In fact, I'm not an expert on any of this. However, this is just what I've found from articulating prior turtles. So, for bone identification, I find it is very helpful to look at other skeletons if you can look them up online. I found that it's very difficult with turtles, but it can be found. And even if it's not a box turtle, turtles in general are very similar across the board and can be used as references. There's a very good website if you don't know what bone you are looking at. It's called OsteoID, and I have found that they're very good at knowing or at teaching you what orientation the bone needs to be in and on whether it's the left or right side of the turtle. Video above, I am starting to put together the turtle, starting from the pectoral girdle, working my way out, and then I'm going to reset and go to the pelvic girdle, work my way out towards the limbs, and then I will do the spinal column, and including the skull, and then I will finish it off with the hands and feet. And now you should know how to articulate a turtle. Thank you.